2 years ago, we sold our house and we left the UK to come to Portugal, and we spent a few months traveling the country. We spent about 6 months in the south, and then we moved up here to central Portugal and we bought this 3-acre farm to renovate.
If you're new around here, this is Ricky, I'm Victoria, and we make videos about renovating our homestead here in rural Portugal.
So after 2 years of living here in various locations across the country, we thought it'd be interesting to make a video kind of reviewing and talking about our experiences, and also looking at the expectations we had of Portugal against the realities. Please bear in mind though, this is only our experiences, and you know, everyone's experiences are different, so I'm sure there'll be lots of opinions out there that are different to ours. And if you have one where you've had a similar experience or a differing experience, let us know in the comments, because we'd love to hear from you.
Also, please excuse my sunglasses, but today is the sunniest day.
So firstly, one thing that just never ceases to amaze us here is just how kind, generous and welcoming the Portuguese people are.
For example, shortly after arriving at this property, we were taking a walk down one of the lanes around here and met one of our neighbours for the first time. And before we know it, he's dashed back into the house to bring out his wife, and then shortly after that she actually nips back and brings back an armful of courgettes and what were they?
Cucumbers.
Cucumbers. Yeah, they were massive, weren't they?
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, so we had to complete our dog walk laden with fresh produce. And one of our other neighbours, on a weekly basis, he brings round whatever he's got lots of. It could be oranges, lemons, cabbages,
tomatoes, watermelons.
It just makes you feel so welcome in the community as well. Before we even decided to move to Portugal, one of the aspects that actually swayed our decision was when we saw the crime rate for the country. It is so low. And after being here for a while, I can attest, or we can attest, that really the facts don't lie. It is so safe. I feel so secure just to walk about at night time on my own. I've no quibble and no feeling of unease doing that. Yeah,
and also I think if we were back in the UK or somewhere like that, I would not feel comfortable with Victoria walking out late at night by herself. Not that we do that here, but there is the occasional time where you've had to go and do something, and you know, I really don't have any concerns at all. Same about the safety at our property as well. Of course, there are robberies, there are burglaries and things that happen out here, but they are very few and far between. Personally, we don't know anybody who's been burgled out here. And also another big thing that is a huge difference between the UK and Portugal, especially where we are, you know, in the countryside, is that antisocial behaviour just really isn't a thing, which is crazy coming from the UK, because anybody who lives in the UK knows, whether you live in a village, a town or a city, antisocial behaviour is a really big problem.
As I was leaving the supermarket a couple of weeks ago, there was a lad in front of me. He was probably about 15 years old or something around that, and he just abruptly stopped. I didn't run into him with my trolley, not far off, but I didn't know why he'd stopped, but anyway, he went down and picked up a piece of litter off of the floor. And I think, you know, that random act, that idea to actually take care of your surroundings and take pride in it as well. And I think that's probably quite a nice demonstration that there's a real sense of community and community pride as well, still evident here. One aspect that I think most people, ourselves included to a degree, kind of have some degree of expectation about before they move to a country is the cost of living. So when it comes to food, for us at least, our weekly shop definitely costs more in Portugal than it did in the UK. Another aspect to bear in mind is that I would say anyway, in Portuguese supermarkets, you don't have quite as much choice in the products that you buy as you would in the UK. One aspect that personally affects me is that I have celiac disease, so I need some gluten-free products now and again. And for example, one week you'll go and you'll be able to buy them, and then another week will go by and you just can't get hold of them. So it's a case of buying them when you see them.
I think one really positive thing that Portugal has going for it, which lots of people flock here for, is the cost of property. Property prices here are incredibly affordable, especially when compared to the UK. You know, that's a market we know, so that's the only real comparison we can make. But one thing I will say is that the prices are rising. You know, just in the few years we've been here, we have seen the prices take a sharp rise, and I'm sure people probably who were here before us have noted how much it had gone up by the time we came.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's not a trend that I see stopping anytime soon. You know, there is just an abundance of property available, and there's also a lot of people coming here wanting to live here and enjoy a life in the sun. One thing that has amazed us here and has been a bit of a revelation is just how much wildlife there is. I mean, I know that we live in the countryside, so this is probably a point that is much more specific to us than if you live somewhere that's metropolitan. But, you know, we see so many birds of prey, so many smaller birds, vultures, wild boars, mongoose. What else?
Snakes.
Snakes.
They're not venomous though.
No, not venomous.
No.
I think there's one venomous snake in all of Portugal, but it's very rare. But yeah, lizards, scorpions, so many different things, and you see these things all the time. So it's been really good in terms of an education as well, because lots of these things I never knew about, whereas now we have a little bit of knowledge on, which is good.
You might be wondering who this little person is. If you're not familiar with our videos, then maybe you've not met her before, but this is actually Poppy, and she actually came to us. She was a street dog, and she kind of decided to start living with us. But unfortunately, there are lots. Oh, thank you so much. There are lots of stray animals, cats and dogs, in Portugal, which is, it's sad to see, but there are lots of organisations that wherever you're living, whether it's the UK or other places in Europe, you absolutely can adopt from there. So highly recommend checking them out.
One thing for us that is a bit of a negative, and if you're an animal lover and you're going to plan to live in rural Portugal, you should really be prepared that you are going to see quite a few animals on chains. Mostly dogs, but also horses, sometimes goats. And it's sad, you know, because lots of these animals are just spending their life on a chain. They don't have freedom to roam in a safe place. It's something that is definitely improving. And a few years ago, I think now, they made a new law which meant a dog couldn't be kept on a chain for longer than 4 hours, and it had to have, you know, water, shelter from the heat, all these types of things. But, you know, in rural areas, it's definitely not being enforced as much as it probably is in other places. But, you know, we're both hopeful that over time it will get better.
Without a doubt, one of our personal motivations in coming to Portugal was the weather.
You're so fortunate. This is like the end of January and it's just beautiful skies, lovely sunshine, and we've had this now for like weeks on end. But, you know, one thing to bear in mind that's really hard to grasp until you've come and lived here is that the weather isn't always like this. You have very cold winters in certain places. You have very wet winters at times. You know, although we've got lovely weather now, and I say we've had it for a couple of weeks, before that, for the last month maybe,
easily,
it was raining so heavily. There was flooding all over the country, and it was just a bit of an unpleasant time to be living here, if I'm being honest. And similarly, in the summer, it's not like where we're in the UK. You know, the summer is celebrated because the weather, you know, at its peak is like between 20, 25. Sometimes it does get hotter, but most of the time that's it. So it's a really nice, comfortable temperature. The summer here is brutal, to the point of, I would say, we don't enjoy it, because, you know, the temperatures between 30, 40 degrees, sometimes over 40 degrees. And, you know, we came here because we like being outside, and during that time you just can't be outside. Like, it's really uncomfortable, but also you have to really be careful of getting burnt. And
Also for the animals, we have 2 dogs, so their well-being is like right at the top of our priority list. So you do have to be really cautious about exposure for the animals as well.
Yeah, but just to end this little segment on, I will say the autumns here and the springs here are just incredible. You know, they are probably comparable to, if I was to think back to the UK, what the perfect summer would be like.
Yes.
And that is largely what autumn and spring are like here. You know, high teens, 20 degrees, sunny all the time.
Blue skies.
Yeah, it's a lovely time to be outside and be in the countryside.
Portugal has a national health service, and although we're used to it, certainly for some other people, other nationalities who move here, that will be a huge bonus. Last year, we actually had first-hand experience using the National Health Service here. An ambulance had to be called for me, and unbelievably, it arrived within 10 minutes, even though we live in the heart of the countryside in a really remote place. After that, I was treated in the hospital, and further to that, I was referred to some specialists, and at every point, people were kind and patient, and it was just overall a really, really positive experience.
So one thing that we've noticed during our time here is how much the need to speak the language differs in different areas across the country. So, for example, when we were in the south, in lots of places, because tourism is such a big industry there, most people spoke English. And at that time, we were new here, so we spoke a little Portuguese, but loads of people just realised we were English and they spoke to us in English. Now, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, you know, that's up to you. But when you're new to the country, it certainly is handy. But when we were up here in the middle of the country, almost nobody speaks English. No, it's a lot more of an older community up here. Lots of the young people are taught from a young age, but as many of you might know, the young people in Portugal tend to migrate to the cities or they move abroad. So in these kind of rural areas, you really need to learn to speak Portuguese to be able to communicate with your neighbours. Estamos a aprender português, mas não conseguimos falar muito bem. Ainda. It's a really difficult language, and you know, we've been trying to learn. Granted, we've not been putting in as much time as we would like to, and you know, that's one of our big things for 2023 is to put more time, more frequently into expanding our knowledge. So if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that if you are coming to the country, do try and learn the language, because even if you don't speak it well, the people here are really friendly, and by you just making the effort, even if the person can speak English, just by you making the effort to speak Portuguese, we've noticed that they respond to you really well. They're really smiley and they're really glad that you're trying. So this one is kind of a positive and a negative. So I think lots of people, us included, come here because you're expecting a slower pace of life. But one thing to be prepared for is that everybody else has got that slower pace of life. So with that, you know, that means that if you want something done quickly, you know, by a business, a company, a tradesman, don't hold your breath, because it's going to take much longer than you think.
One thing to bear in mind as well is if you're in town doing some shopping, a lot of businesses and shops will just close for lunch. And we're not talking 30 minutes, we're talking 2 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely bear that one in mind.
Yeah.
One aspect that we probably underestimated before moving to Portugal was actually the beauty of the natural landscape here.
It really is outstanding, and it's just everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. You are so spoiled, and every single time we take a drive, even the drive to the supermarket, which normally is like a pretty tedious drive, here there's no end of views, and you always see something that really takes your breath away or really makes you kind of feel grateful that you're here.
Yeah, it's a pinch me moment. I'm actually from the countryside in England, but even for me, who's a little bit spoilt with beautiful landscapes, Portugal is next level. It's so impressive.
I think one of the most amazing things about it is just how untouched and raw the landscape is. And because there is just so much of it, it is just awe-inspiring. Obviously, bear in mind the population here is considerably lower than other countries, so that's why so much of it is untouched, but still it's something to really appreciate and savor when you're here. And kind of on a side note to this is just acknowledging how clean the country is. Wild areas, you don't see litter. Roads, villages, towns, everywhere is so well cared for, and yeah, that's something that we really appreciate.
So, the big question, after everything we've discussed and everything that we've shared about our experience the past 2 years, if we could do it all again, would we move to Portugal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I think, given all the things we've said today, I think it's obvious that we really love being here. And we've given our honest opinions because, we're not trying to paint this perfect picture of Portugal, because nowhere is perfect. Yeah. It has its downsides, and I'm sure if you speak to Portuguese people, they'll agree with lots of things that we've said. But for us, the pros far outweigh the cons. The landscape, the people, the wildlife, the outdoors life, the climate.
It's never ending.
Yeah, it really is never ending, and we just have a much better quality of life here and a much more fulfilling life here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So if you're thinking of moving to Portugal, we hope you found this video interesting. If you disagree with some of the stuff we've said, I really hope we haven't offended anybody. We were just trying to give our, honest opinion of what we've learned in the last 2 years. Whether you agree or disagree with what we've said, let us know in the comments, because it's always interesting to get other people's perspectives. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next week when we'll be back with another video, renovating the farm.
Until then.